large language models are kind of like these brilliant minds, right? But they're stuck in a box. They know so much, but all that knowledge is frozen at a certain point in time, and they can't actually do anything in the real world. Well, today, we're going to pry that box open.
And this isolation, it's a huge deal. It's why you get outdated answers. It's why an AI can't tap into your company's live sales data, for instance. And it's what leads to those infamous hallucinations, where the model just, well, it confidently makes stuff up. So how do we connect this incredible brain to the world around it?
We're going to look at two really powerful solutions. First up, we'll dive into RAG, which is all about grounding our AI in solid facts. Then, we'll talk about MCP, which is about empowering that AI to take real action. We'll put them head-to-head, figure out which one you need and when, and then take a peek at the agentic future where they both come together.
Okay, let's kick things off with RAG, or Retrieval-Augmented Generation. Now, the absolute best way to think about RAG is like giving your LLM an open book exam. But, and this is the important part, the book isn't the entire internet. It's your specific, hand-picked data. This is so critical because it means the AI is pulling from a source of truth that you actually control and trust.
So, what it all boils down to is this. RAG is about grounding an AI's answers in facts you can actually verify from a knowledge base you trust. Instead of just winging it based on its training data, the LLM is basically forced to show its work, to cite its sources. And that, right there, dramatically cuts down on hallucinations and boosts accuracy. So, how does this whole thing work under the hood? It's actually a pretty elegant three-step dance. First, you take all your documents, policy handbooks, technical manuals, whatever, and you index them. You chop them into smaller chunks and stick them in what's called a vector database. Just think of it like a super smart library that organizes information by meaning, not just keywords. Then, when a user asks a question, the system retrieves the most relevant chunks of text. Finally, it bundles those chunks together with the original question and hands it all to the LLM. It's like saying, hey, answer this question, but only use the information I'm giving you right here.
And this is where RAG just absolutely shines. Think about a call center agent trying to find one specific rule buried in thousands of pages of product manuals. RAG can surface that in a second. Or what about a customer-facing chatbot that can give definitive answers from your company's internal knowledge base instead of just generic, vague replies? Yeah, it's perfect for any time you need deep, accurate knowledge from a very specific set of documents.
Okay, so RAG is all about knowing, but what about doing? I mean, that's the other half of the puzzle, right? This is where we get to the next level of unlocking our AI, and it's where something called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, steps in. See, if RAG gives the LLM a library, MCP gives it a whole toolbox.
At its core, MCP is just a standardized language, a formal contract, really, that lets an LLM talk to outside systems. It's a rule book that says, okay, here are the tools you can use, here's what they do, and here's the exact way you need to ask for them. This is what allows the model to stop just talking and start doing. And this is the magic of MCP right here. I mean, the difference is night and day. Before, you'd ask about the weather and the LLM would just apologize. With MCP, the LLM understands the request, it figures out it needs a tool, and it outputs a clean, structured call like get current weather. The system sees that, goes and calls a real weather API, gets the live data, and feeds it right back to the LLM. Just like that, your AI goes from being a conversationalist to being a genuine assistant that gets things done.
And believe it or not, it doesn't stop there. The next frontier, the thing people are really excited about, is code execution. So instead of just calling a tool you've already given it, the LLM can actually write and run its own little piece of code to solve a problem on the fly. Now that's incredibly powerful, but you can probably guess it has to be done in a super secure, sandboxed environment. You definitely don't want it running wild. All right, so we've got RAG for knowing, and we've got MCP for doing. Now let's put them in the ring, side by side, so we can really get a feel for what makes each one tick and where they fit in the grand scheme of things.
The best analogy I've heard for this is a bookstore assistant. So if you walk up and ask, what's your return policy? The assistant uses their knowledge, that's RAG. They're retrieving information from a static handbook. But if you ask, hey, do you have the book Dune in stock right now? They have to perform an action. That's MCP. They have to check the live dynamic inventory system. One is about knowing something that's already written down. The other is about interacting with a system to get real-time info. This table really nails the breakdown. Look at the purpose. RAG is for answering questions from existing static data. MCP is for executing tasks and getting live data. The data source for RAG is usually a vector database full of documents.
For MCP, it's live systems, APIs, databases, you name it. And the biggest challenge for each? With RAG, it's all about making sure you pull back the right piece of information. With MCP, the challenge is different. It's about making sure the tools you're calling are reliable and, most importantly, secure.
So, understanding the difference is great, but the real question is, how do you choose? How do you know which path to go down for your specific project? Well, it actually boils down to answering one of two very simple questions.
If the answer here is yes, then RAG is your answer. Simple as that. You're building an expert, a specialist that has perfectly memorized a specific library of information. Your goal is to get accurate, fact-based answers from that closed universe of data.
But, on the other hand, if your AI needs to actually go out and do something, book a meeting, check an order status, query a live database, then you're in MCP territory. You're not building a librarian, you're building an assistant that can actually take action on behalf of a user.
But here's the real secret, the part where things get really powerful. You don't always have to choose. In fact, the most advanced systems use a hybrid approach. They combine RAG's deep knowledge with MCP's ability to act. Let's go back to that customer support bot. A customer asks, "Can I return this shirt I bought last week?" First, the bot uses RAG to pull up the company's 30-day return policy. Then it uses MCP to call an API to check the customer's actual purchase date and maybe even check live inventory to see if an exchange is possible. See? Knowledge and action, together.
And this hybrid approach, it's not just a cool idea. It gets real measurable results. A recent financial study built what they called a hybrid RAG system. They tested it on how relevant its answers were to really complex financial questions. The result? It scored a 0.96. That's basically an A+ in relevance. It's a huge leap in accuracy compared to systems that only use one or the other. It's just clear proof that when you combine knowing with doing, you get a much smarter AI. So as we start to wrap up, it's pretty clear that RAG and MCP aren't really competitors. They're two essential, totally complementary pieces of a much bigger puzzle. Let's finish up by looking at what happens when you snap these pieces together and build the future of AI.
Honestly, if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. It's not RAG versus MCP. It's RAG and MCP. You really need both to build the kind of truly capable, intelligent AI systems that can not only understand the world, but actually interact with it. And this combination is what's launching us into what everyone is calling the agentic era of AI. In this world, the LLM isn't just a chatbot, it's a central reasoning engine. It's an orchestrator. It doesn't just respond, it plans out a whole strategy to get something done. It decides when to use RAG to look something up and when to use MCP to take an action. The ultimate goal here is total autonomous task completion. And that kind of leaves us with this huge, fascinating question for the future. As we keep blurring the lines between knowing things and doing things, are we just building better tools, smarter chatbots, and more efficient assistants? Or are we actually taking the very first steps toward building truly autonomous agents that can think, plan, and operate all on their own in our digital world? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.